Okay. Hello, hello, and welcome to my stream. My name is EC, and I like to have respectful conversations about nuanced topics. Today, we're going to be discussing the idea of, is it activism or is it entertainment? And we're going to be looking into some of the, examples of both. So, one reason I decided to go into this topic was because there has been a lot of discourse recently about various, I'm not even sure what you could call them, but various focuses in news media that has been parodied many, many times by, I guess you could say, comedy media that a lot of people actually use to get their news. Things like The Daily Show or John Oliver. And the particular incident in question that I am referencing is actually the reflecting pool and the ways that the narrative and discussion around it has taken over a lot of discourse in a lot of the, traditional media sources and even non traditional ones. But at the same time, what does that really mean in regards to very real world issues that are going on? And yes, the reflecting pool is easy to play for laughs, but what does it mean that our president can focus on things like that instead on huge international political conflicts or very real internal struggles that are affecting the lives of so many of us? If you are curious about what today's topic is going to be, then don't hesitate to jump in. And if you haven't yet, please don't forget to subscribe. I do live streams weekly on Wednesdays, normally at 7:30. I had an interesting camera issue this time, so I'm a little bit late, but I am here and I'm excited to have this conversation. Let me also just check and make sure I can get the chat going because it's being silly again. So here we go. Okay. Oh, aha. Hey, Aqua. Oh, I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. Oh, man. But yeah, I guess my first question is, what is the first time you were aware of a major, what do I say? A major um, component of a concept, like a social issue or a political issue that was represented by a celebrity or that became a soundbite on a social media platform. Do you remember the very first infographic you ever shared? And what types of social or political, which I personally believe are inherently linked, campaigns or narratives do you remember engaging with first through the lens of social media? I actually don't know. Oh, you know what? I think for me it was um, queer rights. And that was very relevant, especially at the time when I was in high school and I was trying to um, living in a southern space that had very rigid social norms about what was allowed and expected, regardless of where many polling spaces deemed the country to be, and in terms of acceptance at least. And so, ooh, Aqua's saying the entire Obama campaign. Oh, yeah, with all the hope posters. Yeah. Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah. That's very effective use of media and art to create a sense of social narrative that is directly effective towards politics. Actually, that's so fascinating. Aqua, I love that you brought that up because one of the components that is really important when discussing this conversation is recognizing the role of propaganda in supporting or even raising awareness around particular issues. And I know the Obama Hope campaign, poster campaign, is not probably the first thing you would think of when it comes to propaganda, because when we think of propaganda, we normally think of right-wing fascist communication, the idea of placing certain values as the ideal values that need to be upheld by everybody who wants to participate in the governmental expectation of what the country should be striving towards. But um there were Aqua says that there were pinatas of Obama that were paraded through the streets, and you saw a lot of posts about that as well. Whoa, that's wild. I did not know that. I did not know that at all. I did not know that there were piñatas of Obama that were paraded through the streets for. Do you feel like those, because obviously I didn't see these things. Do you feel awkward at all that those piñatas were positive, or were they supposed to be dehumanizing for the Obama administration and Obama himself? Because my inherent assumption is not positive. My inherent assumption is, especially with what you're supposed to do with piñatas, is not a good thing. So, that's concerning. Hate campaigns against him. Okay. Aka says there are hate campaigns. That makes perfect sense, because considering the social expectation around what happens with the piñata, that makes sense. Okay. So that in of itself, because again, another way that art and social demonstration, and that social demonstration being captured on film and distributed through social media networks, is very representative of the concept of propaganda and the utilization of social media as a tool for that. I I'm oof, gosh, that's sickening. That's deeply sickening. That is, when you, oh God, when you think of the depths of just how many wrong, evil components that required to make and to parade through the streets. That is bad. That is very bad. Oh my God. So oof, that is concerning. So that is okay. So, and then I guess that the question there is that activism or is that entertainment? And I think maybe what we should do is define the difference between the two and see where things hold up. So, activism is generally held to be the use of media, community, collaboration, gathering of people, and exploration of literature to affect social and political change on a larger level. It doesn't always mean governmental, but it often needs to translate that to that when various issues are not being affected positively or corrected in a social landscape. Whereas entertainment is supposed to be a story of some kind, either brought to life or communicated within a community to explore the concepts of the story. Now, you can have a lot of entertainment that does a lot of social commentary, and you can have activism that includes elements of entertainment. For example, let's go back to the Obama Hope campaign poster. That has a lot of elements of entertainment, because the idea behind using the artist who created that poster was to tap into a form of resistance art, which was, who was it, Stephen Ferry, who made like the Obey posters? And they were it's a form of street art that is and muraling that or mural is that how you say it? Yeah, muraling that was supposed to uh, call attention to various ideas or issues and operate as a method of social critique, especially considering that a lot of the posters originally and the like murals appeared in various spaces like public spaces or on buildings that couldn't immediately identify the artist. So there was a way to engage with the art without identifying with the artist or bringing the artist fame. Instead, it was an opportunity for a person to create a form of social protest that could be seen by many people and leave that form of social protest in a space that would possibly affect other people, other members of the community, so that they could either choose to engage further with the issues that the artist was trying to raise awareness against or the social commentary the artist was exploring. Banksy's, I think, probably the most famous modern version of that kind of art. Um, I know that Banksy may have been doxxed this past year, but um, the general expectation is that nobody knows who Banksy is because the whole point of Banksy's art is that they are a creator who is simply commenting on major social issues while also utilizing their art form to sometimes make forms of entertainment in artistic representation, depending on the types of things that they explore. Sometimes it's it depends on the type of mural that is left behind, and it's always done in secrecy. Now, there's again a very long history to muralism and even street art and graffiti that goes in and is inherently tied into the politics of growing up in a space or living in a space where one is experiencing poverty and others are not. Because muralist art and street graffiti and street art is often a method of communication that is done by a and developed by impoverished communities to speak out and leave messages for the greater community to either issues happening in a more in within the area or the community that is the most negatively affected by various policies or social conditioning or social expectations and structure. Capitalism is I think one of the most consistently critiqued components of mural art, where it is and racism and police brutality. And there are certain themes that are associated with muralist art and with various forms of street graffiti. There's also a connection inherently with the form to people who are not often represented positively in social structures because they either don't fit into traditional social narratives of having certain kinds of housing or they don't fit into social community structures where they may be more involved in um, alternative communities. That can include gangs, but not exclusively. And again, I also don't one thing I also want to identify is that street art and muralist art is not inherently a sign that somebody is who made it is involved in any type of like criminal activity or social ill. Rather, that they are possibly using a form of uh, art that is accessible when one doesn't have a huge amount of finances available to explore their art forms or leave or explore social critiques about major issues, especially ones that might be affecting them personally or their communities. So, in general, I guess you could say it's not often that you see forms of graffiti or certain types of street art that are developed in um, Fortune 500 neighborhoods. it is often something that you see more consistently and represented more consistently within communities that haven't experienced the more mm, comfortable components of access to wealth and things and the social assumptions about people who have wealth versus those who don't. But that is, again, and street art is possibly one of the first forms of, I guess, bite-size art, or art that can be easily um, captured and then distributed online, because it does take from, um, there's certain types of cartoonist designs and styles that, again, are seen as more accessible for various areas of the population. Um, and it's often related to one's access to like higher level academics. But the other thing that I think is interesting about the Obama Hope poster is there's a very purposeful reason why Obama's team chose that artist to create that poster. And that was to tap in to that sense of connection to all levels of American communities, and to also show Obama as a representation. Hi, Riley. Hello, hello. To show Obama as a representation of all levels of the American populace, and not just focusing on certain groups of people who have deeper pockets. Um, so that was a really great example, Aqua. That was awesome. Um, but yes, so not only is that social media, and that, I guess, is a good example of activist and entertainment at the same time, where there were deeper cultural and social ties based on the type of art that was being used to directly propagate a political campaign. And that led to very real world political change. We got our very first Black American president. We also got our you know, continuation of the Patriot Act. But there was, so, there a conversation about Obama is its own thing. But in regards to brilliant social communication through the use of art that was inherently political, that's a really, really good example. There's another example that I kind of wanted to discuss that was a combination of both entertainment and activism, and that was the Kony 2012 social media campaign, which is actually, I now found out, is considered one of the very first blueprints of how to do social media campaigns for uh, major international conflicts or issues. And since humans have been in community with each other, there has always been a component of every community who will speak to the issues inherent in that community, either propagated by the rulers of that community or who are trying to acknowledge greater issues that they feel are being ignored by the community in favor of more like internal issues. For example, uh, saving the environment, or what's the joke, save the whales. It's always whether or not it's looking beyond traditional like social structures and hierarchies to look at the greater earth as a whole and our role within it as humans. And one of the interesting things that has definitely been around equally as long is the use of art as a form of social critique. And that leaves, I think it left me with a question of what does that social critique do when it's showcased in art? And is that critique enough? Some examples are a lot of traditional plays were critiques of or explorations of the dangers of various social goals that were attempted to be achieved, normally by the villain, in a way that was disingenuous or was confounding to whatever social mores were the most present, the most popular at the time. And you see that in Shakespeare, you see that in you see that definitely in books like George Orwell. His books are probably some of the most directly and accepted versions of both social critique, political critique, and economic critique in a art form that many assume is purely art, but is very clearly an attempt to raise awareness and is quite, I think, easily identified as a form of activism. But there's other ways that we, in a more modern sense, like to explore concepts of activism and sometimes struggle, at least I would argue, struggle to separate that activism from entertainment. And that's when we can. Hi, Brant. Hello, hello. How are you? Hi. That's when we can get into a bit of a dangerous territory with a concept like virtue signaling, where you'll see people who will utilize social media exclusively as a way to indicate or to signal that they are aware and mindful of certain major social issues or pressures in order to appease their audience versus being able to tell, and us as the audience being able to tell how much they actually mean it when it comes to the infographic they may have reposted or the story they may have shared to raise awareness about whichever particular social issue or international conflict or major um, disturbance is happening that needs support. And one thing that's interesting is with social media, we've got a rise of new celebrities, and these are people who traditionally don't fit into the traditional legacy structure of how celebrity works. Oh, hey, Bobby Christine, hello, hello. Oh, for microphone volume, am I too quiet? Let me see. Let me check on this. Am I? Wait. Oh, hello. It's me. Can you hear me? Um. Okay. Also, Bobby Christine, I just made you a moderator. Yay! Am I any louder now, or am I still really quiet? Also, am I showing up in vertical or horizontal this time? It's an ASMR set. Hey, hi Trey, how are you? Hello, hello, hello. Oh man. Um. Oh yeah, I guess that is my question. Am I all vertical or am I in my box, full box or small box? That was weird. Sorry. But yeah, I guess that's my question. Um, and is it more ASMR or is it a little bit? Oh, yay! So it is working. I don't know what I did. That's awesome. That's cool. I'm proud. Yay! Okay, I'm moving my mic a little to see if that helps. Um, I'm sitting back a little farther than normal because I was assuming with the vertical structure, you probably wouldn't be able to, I would just be like, my face would be like right in your face, and that can be a little uncomfortable. But yeah. Volume's a bit better. Okay. Wonder how I can fix this. If I hold, okay, let's do a test. What have I done? If I hold this, does it sound awful? Like, can you hear every movement that I make? Or my hands badly? Because I know this mic picks up a shocking amount that is on the table and not always my voice. So, how is this now? Are we better? Did we get somewhere? The forever experiences of, can you hear? Can you hear her now? Oh my gosh. But I hope this is better, and if I'm now yelling in your ear, I apologize. You can definitely hear hand movement. Okay, gonna put the mic down. Sorry. That seemed like it would be painful. Whenever I'm listening back to like videos that when I'm doing the editing for um videos that I've recorded, bumps and blips. Oh no. All right, that means that my boom arm is gonna have to come back into the picture. That's fine. I have a little arm thing, but I don't want to subject you to the sound of that one. The Can You Hear Me Now campaign? What's the Can You Hear Me Now campaign, Aqua? Oof. I actually I don't know. What is the Can You Hear Me Now campaign? Um, hmm. Ow, that was my neck. Okay. Oh my gosh. The misadventures of my live streams, they are always silly in hopefully a good way. But okay, so we're talking about activism, we're talking about entertainment, we're talking about various campaigns or various components that help illustrate the idea of either or things that marry the two and what value they ultimately serve on a larger level, especially now in our social media age and now in the Verizon guy. Oh, I've seen those on YouTube. Yes. 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 Oh my God. Yes. That feels like a I don't know. Like, when you unlock a memory that you didn't know you had. That one. That's so funny. Yeah. It feels very grainy. That's hilarious. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is this better? Um, but yes. Okay. So, back to activism or entertainment. One of the kind of the point that I was getting to with what I was saying was the idea of the little black squares that came out with the um, 2020 Black Lives Matter movement and the way that social media was used as a major method of communication about the history of systemic racism and systemic issues in the United States, and how that was something that as a country, the entire community of United States needed to reckon with and actually ask for change in the wake of the on-screen murder of unaliving of George Floyd. And there was a also, because it was all on social media, and there was a very real backlash as well for creators who didn't engage with that commentary and who didn't engage with either posting the black square or um, acknowledging the movement. And it became a mark of identification within social media spaces that had very real world effect, to the degree that if you did post about a black square and that was the only thing you had done, it became its own version of a warning signal to many, many people about how you, as an influencer or as a person on the internet or whatever, especially if you had a massive platform, this was most focused on people who had platforms and had the opportunity to use their platform to communicate to a much larger swath of people than many of the activists on the ground who had perhaps been doing the work for a very long time. Um, Anybody who was, I guess you could say, perfunctorily just posting a black square and then moving on as if business was as usual became a source of ridicule, and experienced social pushback because it became like a example of what is now called selective activism or selectivism or clicktivism, which is when you are using activism to gain social media um, engagement in order to finance and support yourself, and in with little to no care about the effect that that might have on whatever it is you're supposed to be raising awareness about. And the Black Lives Matter movement was, I think, the most clearly defined example of that that was done on social media. Now, at the same time, a thing that was also really important is the use of social media actually did heavily support very, very real world results. There were hundreds of thousands of millions of people worldwide who gathered to protest, educate themselves, and actually become involved in real activist organizations, or at the very least to demonstrate their support for anybody who was actively involved in those organizations and for their communities, to try and show solidarity if they were an ally, and to also connect with community in a space where there was a lot of very righteous desire for change. Um, and then Brant is saying, there are certainly people making money off of activism, but not giving it to aid communities that they claim to advocate for. Um, And Ellie says, forgive me if I sound insensitive, but why would a celebrity posting a black square mean anything if they don't do anything about it? It doesn't make sense to me. Well, Ellie, you hit the nail right on the head. And that is kind of maybe the core component of this idea of activism versus entertainment. If a person is using um, a form of social commentary through their social media platform to indicate their involvement in a movement, but are not actually involved in that movement, what's the point of them pretending to be in the first place? There were actually influencers and celebrities who would. What? Did it just stop? Oh no, am I still alive? Uh-oh. Okay, I'm back. Panic. Sorry. But yes, if an influencer or a celebrity is doing something like that, it is very clearly disingenuous, because at the same time, there, especially once the black square became kind of a social pariah signifier, um, people started realizing that if you weren't going to protests and you had the capability to safely, then there was a very strong sense of, if not now, when? And a commentary, especially on any influencer or creator who wasn't participating, even if they were saying that they cared online in any sense, unless they were actively outing themselves as being anti-Black or racist. And a lot of people did end up outing themselves as being anti-Black or racist. But people who were really concentrated on protecting their finances instead chose to perform as if they were actually invested. And so you saw as the kind of stakes rose and there was more social backlash for anybody who posted a black square and then did nothing else. Um, there was a desire to see people actively in the streets doing something. And so that meant going to protests and showing yourself at a protest, or at least sharing and involving yourself in real world um, activist situations. Oh, Brant says, okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you. Ooh, Aqua is also bringing up the Arms of Angels campaign. I think it's the earliest example of a celebrity using a social issue for attention. Arms of the oh, oh God. Oh, I hear the song. The pain. Oh, the pain. Um I also have another, okay, that's going to be a tangent I'm going to go into in a second. I have to finish this thought. But you'd have these celebrities, or you would have these influencers, especially, who are already getting lambasted on a social level as people were taking a hard look at the structures that we all lived in as being like excessive and vapid and self-obsessed and navel-gazing. You had influencers who are trying to combat that expectation by going to protests with a sign that assistants or maybe they had made only long enough to jump into the protest, work their way into the crowd, and then have get proper pictures where they looked great, um, and then leave. So they didn't really fully involve themselves in the protest at all, other than to get a photo op. And what does that leave you with? Hey, Theo, it's good to see you. Hello, hello. Happy Wednesday. It is Wednesday. Hello, hello. Um, and then Brand is saying you saw a lot of that with the Wall Street protests. Oh yeah, the God, what was that called? Not Democracy Now. The sit-ins. Why is my brain forgetting this? I had a very close friend whose elder Occupy Wall Street. That's it. Whose elder brother was very, very involved in that. Um, Oh, really? Ali says, real Brita quote, I can excuse racism, but I draw the line at animal cruelty. Oh, God. Whoo! Eeh. Um, oh, and then the Arms of the Angels campaign tangent I was going to get on. So before I was actively in the like religious, so this is going to be a bit of a tangent. So when I was a kid, very small, very, very young, my very best friend as a child, somebody that I worshipped, was actively getting sucked into, and her mother was getting actively sucked into a cult. And it was like a very tiny little religious community, religious group. Um, and she was oh my God. And one of the ways that she started propagating the ideas of her beliefs to me, mind you, I was in early elementary school. I think I was in first grade. It might have been before when she first started this. Yeah, I was tiny. I was tiny. I was little, little. But yeah, so she there was this movie that was a religious movie um that was about a small child who was living in a I guess in extreme poverty in England in like the 1800s, and had a alcoholic father and no other parent involved, and was forced to beg on the streets for his father. And then eventually, after suffering and suffering and suffering, and it showed horrible suffering, especially for a child to be seeing, um, the child had shown themselves so good and pure of heart that they were collected by an angel because they ended up passing away in the street from malnutrition and exposure to the elements. And the song that played as the angel came to get him was In the Arms of the Angels. So every single time I would see that ad, that's what I thought of. And I know as soon as I said it, you can hear it now, can't you? That features all of these images of these very, very, very sad looking animals that are is supposed to be raising awareness um, about the like issues with euthanasia in shelters, and also trying to raise awareness about actually responsible pet ownership. But yeah. Oh no, I disappeared and then I'm coming back. Oh Lord. Ooh, okay, so I'm catching up on chat now. Brant is actually talking about okay, so Brand is saying the problem with political movements on the left is they are so decentralized that the actual asks or objectives are never clear or move in a very organized or move in a disorganized fashion. Um, and then Ellie is talking about another good example of virtue signaling, which is seeing how I based most off pop culture. I can't help but think of Britta from the TV show Community. She's a virtue signaling stay-at-home activist. Gosh, okay. I have to admit, I did not watch Community. Okay, Mark. Hi, Mark. Hello, hello. Why does that? Oh, it made me think of The Room. Oh, hi, Mark. I've never seen The Room, but I've seen a lot of things about it. And it's saying I'm seeing, but I'm not hearing anything. What about now? Can you hear me now? Am I available in audio and visual format? I hope. Oh gosh. Did I accidentally create a big problem? The Room is a movie, I guess? That's a good question. I don't know. Is it a movie? Is it a experimental performance art? We will never know. Tommy Wiseau still shows up and has screenings in LA, and no one knows who he really is. He's such a mysterious figure. There aren't really figures like that, I guess, in the way celebrity works now, are there? Where you really don't know anything about them, and they just somehow manage to do things. It's so odd. He's like from an era that is long gone by. Oh, Aqua's saying you saw the entirety. I feel like I should apologize. I've heard it's the worst movie of all time. Um, Ellie says The Room is one of those movies that's so bad it's a masterpiece. Nice. Um, Interesting. Theo is saying from personal experience, most political activism in Europe is by young adults that are influenced by older peers. And it is commonly done as a trend instead of actual activism. Actually, Theo, you know what's interesting is I remember being very surprised by this. I lived in France for about a year when I was in high school. And I'd always heard, because I have French family on my mom's side, I'd always heard that like if as a joke that with the French, if you want a holiday, you strike. And that striking is very common in France because it is a very protected right of French law. And French relationships in regards to the government and to politics in general is very different than American structure. There is a far more intense sense of responsibility that the French, I think, assume their government is supposed to actually achieve in regards to achieving what they were voted in to do. But again, that is very dependent on what is popular at the time. But I remember when I was in high school and I didn't speak the language, because I didn't speak the language when I moved there. I lived with people I'd never met before, and I had to immerse and figure it out. Um, I remember being absolutely shocked and confused because, especially for the first 6 months, I couldn't understand anything that was going on. People would speak, and I'd have no idea what was. I mean, even if there were words that I might have recognized, in the entire stream of being in a like being in a space where there were no languages, no components of a language I fully recognized, my brain wasn't computing and not operating. So I had no idea why suddenly in the middle of class a bunch of kids were like, "Okay, we're going," and then the teacher's like, "Oh, I guess it's time, okay," and then we all went outside, and then we very it was very there was a lot of positive energy, and then everybody very orderly so walked down to the centre-ville, and then we walked around, and people were chanting and shouting, and the teachers were there along with the students, but the students were the ones leading it, and they had signs, and they were very serious, and then they had the like I guess the police basically had us all sit down, and somebody came up and gave a speech, and people cheered. I don't know what was said, and then everybody went home. And that was it. And I remember thinking, is this a protest? This is why people protest, because I thought protests were always, people throwing rocks and the cops coming after you and attacking you. I did not realize that you could have an orderly protest like that. There's this like dance that happens where everybody seems to respect each other. The cops weren't like anti, they were like, "Yeah, go you." I had never expected to see that in my life. Cops being on the side of the community in that way specifically. But as a whole, it was just a thing, and it happened multiple times throughout the year. Um, and yeah, I remember, and the reason that the entire protest happened, I eventually found out, was because the retirement age in France had been raised, and there was a lot of frustration about it. And then in what was it? There was also, of course, the very famous lighting on fire of the highways that were done in France with the yellow jackets. Um, and the launching of manure at various official buildings or governmental buildings to protest different changes that were being established by Macron. That was like a big frustration because, of course, you did have like certain rules changing about access to governmental assistance based on age and based on working status and a bunch of other things. But there was also a quiet conservatism that was in the thread of that movement. It was very interesting because it's a very different social dynamic and structure to how American politics work, and at the same time, American reaction to those politics. So I Oh, that's so interesting. Theo says in Germany we call those kids trend right or to trend left. That's interesting. Oh my gosh. I see. And Theo says that they basically go along with the most popular ideas of the adults. And that is what. Interesting. Brant is saying that political activism in Europe is influenced by very different things. Instead of being influenced by businesses or people specifically, it is generally um, influenced by different political or policy changes, I would imagine. And they don't really have a political consulting culture like we do. Well, that is one thing about American politics that is very different, that does not show up the same in other countries. Not to say that there isn't a form of it, but it doesn't show up the same. In the United States, we have lobbying, and that is not a widely copied version, like method of supporting or encouraging or pressuring various motions to pass. And lobbying is essentially a opportunity for interests of particular businesses or movements to interact with politicians in a way that gives them an edge to getting that politician to vote in specific ways. So if you have a representative from, say, a gun rights activist group that is a lobbyist, they will work very hard to lobby various members of Congress to reduce, for example, the amount of regulations passed on gun ownership, and they are often successful. But that is just one form. As Brand is saying, not all lobbyists are bad, but businesses and people with money do get a lot more resources, and that's true. And that is essentially the entire issue with lobbying, is that it is a rich man's game. The more money that you have, the more effective your lobbying can be. And if you are not careful, it can lead to some questionable interactions, that with even the slightest of examination could be interpreted as bribes. But it depends a lot on the organization. It depends a lot on the general theme of the cabinet that is being lobbied. So if you have a more progressive, or democratic, I should say, versus progressive, but if you have a more democratically or liberal, neoliberally minded cabinet, it's a little bit harder for certain areas of lobbying to be as successful. Whereas at the moment, lobbying is very successful, and there are a lot of gifts in exchange that are not questioned to the degree that they maybe could be. But Aqua says lobbying is modern day political machines. And Brandt says that if you hire an ex-congressman, the doors that open are amazing. That is true, especially with lobbyists, and it is not uncommon for Congress people to have been lobbyists or to have a relationship with particular lobbyists, which can lead to conflicts of interest. But that is an entire other conversation for sure. Oh, actually, yes. Ellie also brings up how I don't know how y'all feel about them, but I'm not so hot about Jubilee. They reduce debate to owning culture, basically farming extreme reaction rather than any real points being discussed. Yes. Okay, so that is I think, the quintessential example of entertainment instead of activism. And while it can be useful for raising some kinds of awareness with the state of the Overton window, which is, if you don't know, the Overton window is the general political leanings of the large swath of the population. So if the Overton window, there's like a spectrum to any political space. So you have, like, on one end you have ultra far right, like neo-Nazi right. On the other end you have extraordinarily radical left. And then you're right, Jay, they really should question a lot of those gifts. And then in the middle you have the center, and you have a full range all the way from one end to the other towards the center of different levels on the spectrum of where people fall in political ideology. And with certain swaths of the population, I'm going to identify it as the most neoliberal swaths of the population. There are a lot, and maybe more traditional Republicans of the old guard, which I don't think many Republicans of the old guard realize that they are as not represented by the modern Republican Party as they may think, like the McCain Republicans. They are somewhere more closer to that center space, and they are often groups of people who don't realize how close we are to one extreme or the other extreme. So the Overton window is basically looking at where along that line of the spectrum we are as a society, and it establishes kind of the end of one era and the beginning, like the entire structure of it. So from one end to the next, and the line goes down through the middle. And what happens is in eras of generalized progressiveness, peace, and economic stability, the Overton window stays pretty close to the center. So a lot of ideas that are considered radical leftist right now are just considered regular ideas. Whereas when we have a social landscape and political landscape that focuses on mega right leaning ideas, we'll start to recalibrate what is seen as regular to radical. So the Overton window has shifted towards the right, and people who previously would have seen themselves as center are now seeing themselves as falling into a more liberal or even closer to leftist area. And I think that is one of the issues with where we are with Jubilee and that concept of entertainment versus activism. And one thing that I also think that is important to keep in mind in exploring this idea of entertainment or activism in the social media age is the fact that when you do have things like social media, which utilizes algorithmic preferences based on our cognitive neurobiological responses versus our psychological expectations, you're gonna get things that are the most reactive, no matter what. So, social media is inherently built to farm clips, segments, and conversations, any type of content that gets the most reactions. So, you see Jubilee exploding as a platform when they realized they could monetize off of political division. And it becomes a form of entertainment. I know that recently there is a debater who has been extraordinarily um, popular on TikTok and online in general, and his name's Dean. I don't know his last name. I don't know if anyone's supposed to. But he is an incredible debater. He's very, very calm and under pressure. He handles difficult, emotionally activating conversations very effectively. And he's quite young. But he is also blonde, blue-eyed, and, I guess what MAGA would idealize as the ideal American man. Is he an adult? I think he's in his early 20s. But he definitely gained fame when he was in his, like, I think, Dean Withers. Yes, yes. He recently was on Jubilee and he was debating 20 MAGA people. And like in person. And Dean generally does does live streams where he will ask people to essentially, it's like a radio show. He will ask them to call in and jump into the live and debate with him about various concepts. And he will then use facts and statistics. Now, he normally has a computer in front of him, so he has the technical capability of researching or at least having notes to prepare. But in this Jubilee situation, he had none of that. He was at a table by himself and people would come up and debate and have conversations. And he would have to respond to them very quickly. Now, exactly, Theo was saying the politics within Jubilee are often rewritten to attract attention. And that is what makes it entertainment. Because one of the things that can be quite difficult if you're just kind of coming into this conversation and you're like, what? But isn't that activism? This person who is well spoken, very educated in this area, and can be heard by a population of people who are very clear in their prejudices and will not listen to the people who may be the most negatively affected by those prejudices, is being spoken to by a person who can actually engage. That sounds like it would be a good thing, right? It sounds like it would be a very helpful medium to change people's minds. But what ends up happening is instead it platforms and propagates even more the ideas of the 20 MAGA people. Now, with on leftist spaces, within more leftist spaces, where there are people who are going to agree with what Dean is saying, they're going to see that and feel validated because they will think, wow, look at that. Dean was able to refute the the evil, the cruelty, and say, that is ridiculous. Do you hear yourself? What is wrong with you? And so anybody who is able to see that will say, wow, that person got owned. But on the right, they're not going to be seeing it that way. And it's not changing people's minds in the way that could lead to effective policy change, social change, or activist response. You get a lot of clicks. You get a lot of engagement on social media. People will share the video, they will clip it, they will reshare it, reshare it, reshare it. It will become a sensation, like the goth girl spit. But, oh, good question, Ellie. I'll get to that in a sec. But in terms of what does that actually do, it's hard to measure because it is not driving people towards activism. It's not driving people towards the beleaguered nonprofits that need volunteers, need support. It's not encouraging people or inspiring them in a way that leads to more than personal validation. And instead, it feels more of like a flattening of everybody involved. Uh, Even though all of Dean's points are ridiculously valid and it's exhausting that you would have to have that conversation at all. You also, I think, as a observer, are, if you're watching the Jubilee videos, are probably noticing a pattern. This is just one of many. Dean is the most recent in a long line of rage bait content, because that's what it is. It is using the most flattened structures of people who have minimal amounts of time to try and explore various ideas or topics to state their case, essentially, only so that within this controlled environment, whoever is the better orator or can speak quick enough and recite facts quickly enough, essentially anybody who is a good debater, can then own whoever is seen as incapable of articulating well enough. And I'm not saying this in support of anybody who professes themselves MAGA. In my view, if you are going to go to the degree of identifying yourself with MAGA and you are above the age of 18 and you have been around since, at the very least, you have access to the internet and the capability to recognize basic right from wrong, I have no positive words to say to you. None. I have no sympathy either. So, Ellie, you had asked, would I ever do an in-person debate with a MAGA type individual? And I guess the truth of the matter is that I would not choose to do that unless there was no other opportunity, like no other option. I would certainly defend myself if I was put in a situation where there was no opportunity to extricate myself, but I recognize wholeheartedly that me communicating with them doesn't change their mind. It solidifies their sense of validation. And I did actually, I guess to a degree, have a bit of an experience with that on TikTok when I used to have to do those. Oh God, they sucked. I used to have to do those weird like roulette style um battle things. And there I did end up getting matched with a woman who was very clearly MAGA, identified herself as such, and was a God, it was so awful. I don't know if any of y'all remember that. I know Aqua was there for that. But there was it was just this awful like racist dynamic between this woman and her friend, um, who her friend is a black woman who was there with her and engaging with her in this basically video call thing, live stream video call, and the dynamic was horrific. And there was I knew there was nothing I could say to change her mind. The minute that she saw me, she had her choices and judgment already passed, and there was no way to transcend her expectations to a degree that she may choose to evaluate her racism. And I think that's the thing that I have come to realize, because it's not just, I have had many conversations with people who, before MAGA, were MAGA. And, especially in like high school, especially when I used to run I know I spoke of it before, but I used to like, I co-founded and I helped run like a high school organization that helped um, provide like a safe space and resources for LGBTQIA individuals, but also for anybody who was experiencing religious discrimination, gender discrimination, anything like that, to just explore and just be human, just be themselves. And there were a lot of people that I had to have very uncomfortable conversations with, who wholeheartedly believed that I was supporting sin, that I myself was a sinner and should go to hell. And it wasn't just the Christian mindset of those particular conversations, but a larger mindset that lended towards racism and lended towards intense bigotry. And in all of those conversations, even when I was in high school at the time, I I was the entertainment for them. And I do not want to become entertainment for oppressors. Yeah. Yes, Aqua. Um, Theo was saying what I was struggling with that was having a religious spiritual space without people having conversations about politics. Yeah, that would be very frustrating too. Um, Trey's like, I'd like to see your debate. Um, Oof. I don't know. I will also say that I am very aware of how I react to time-based requirements for conversation. Um, and I definitely get significantly more emotionally activated than you need to be able to handle conversations like that effectively. Um, yeah, definitely. But I definitely would like to have the capability to navigate those conversations, but I know myself well enough. I will get so angry. And that's what they want. And that is what would make me entertainment for them. And I have no desire to become a Jubilee video for anyone, especially if, because I know I'm not going to immediately be able to recall the types of helpful information that could lead even the like an interested viewer who is already of the mindset that is favorable to mine to explore an idea that perhaps they hadn't. That is possibly the only positive I could see coming out of that. But I have very little hope for that. Mm. I was saying, yes, you also had that they've had that experience where, people, when they recognize that you're a leftist, begin to treat you as a prop to try and evoke a angered reaction rather than actually have a conversation with you. That's the thing, is when you are engage in those dynamics, essentially, if what can often happen, and this isn't a condemnation of any debate that people have. I do still think debates can be extraordinarily useful because what they are is not as much for the people involved in the debate as for the audience. And when it comes to political debates that are very, I think, purposely political, where people are having to make a choice between two candidates, it is important to be able to see how candidates will respond when questioned directly about very important topics. That's why hearings happen. That's why our judicial system has the structure it does, where you have like lawyers that can examine or cross-examine witnesses. Because essentially what that is, it's allowing for a community involved response based on what information is shared by the participants who are asking for involvement from the community and support. Now, when you have debates like the ones on Jubilee, you don't get that. Instead, you get to angrily react, or in that process, support the continuation of more videos like that. And that can go into a much dark, like, not that that's not already dark, but that can go into a range of different negative spaces. You see that as well with, again, the goth girl spit situation. There was, I think, a rash in the like late 2010s, 2015s to the 2020s of these different online, I don't know what to call them, but these networks that were operating on especially YouTube, that were in their own sites, where they were creating farmable content for clicks using rage bait concepts and reducing people to one line narratives about themselves that could then be identified with by the audience to pit various ideological forces against each other. Like the whole seven nice guys and seven goth girls tried to do whatever the deal was. Ugh. Ugh. Oh, God, that's so sickening. But there is. Bobby Christine says, I hate that I've fallen into the holes of those videos sometimes. Well, I think, Bobby Christine, I understand why we do it. I understand why, especially when we're trying to come to terms with major political upheaval and the fact that there are swaths of the population who are so willing to avow to everyone their desire for large scale cruelty and destruction and the demonization of others for propagating themselves, especially through like white nationalism and white privilege and white supremacy, all of those things, uh, and incredible and Christian nationalism at the expense of all other religions. It's terrifying, and you need to be able to see that those people can be disproven, because when you see how those mentalities lead to real world impacts, you need to find some way, some opportunity, some source where there is anyone speaking against them and able to accurately articulate all the things that you cannot, because you are affected so deeply. It is terrifying. It's all the things you wish you could say to somebody, which is why they choose people like Dean Withers, because that's what has gotten Dean to fame. Dean is not affected in the same way as the people he's hoping to support, and is also able to refute the dehumanization by the people he's arguing against and debating with. And being able to see somebody do that when you are terrified that there are so many people willing to invest in these cruel ideas, it's validating and it's encouraging. And when we're in spaces where we're seeing, like I said, the Overton window shifting more to the right and seeing fascism arise again and again and again, and things just seem as if nothing is following a expected narrative of basic common decency and sense, it's terrifying and it's exhausting, because all the values that we are taught are supposed to be important in any community are being completely flouted and treated like nothing. And so you need to be able to see somebody doing what feels like something, being able to articulate what you can't. It's what all art does. Now, am I calling the Jubilee videos art? No, not at all. But oration is art. It is an art form. We wouldn't have amazing plays, and we wouldn't love Shakespeare so much if it wasn't. But political oration is terrifying when it is aimed against you. But when it is articulating the things that you are being attacked about, and instead finding a way to refute cruel claims that are completely invalid, it's very comforting. It feels very validating. That's why I think it's entertainment, but it shouldn't be propagated as activism. And I think that's a component of the conversation we need to have as well. What's the value? What's the value in entertainment versus activism? Now, so far, we've talked about a couple of versions of entertainment. Hello, Internet says, I am an activism, and so can you. That is, yes, actually, that's exactly the issue. Yes. Um, but there is a way to use celebrity, art, and platforms, social media, as an opportunity to actively affect real world social change. And art is often a way that people really do that. But we don't always realize it's happening. So, like I said, we've talked about, so Jubilee, I think, is the ideal example of entertainment as that is masquerading as activism, and is highly propagated by social media and is built for clicks, built for its clicktivism, its selectivism. I should say it's clicktivism. The black square on Instagram, and when that failed, the staged photo op at a protest, is selectivism. What's actual activism? Actual activism, especially in the utilization of art as a medium for exploring activism or being an activist activity, I'm sorry, I had to, is a lot more common than we think. There is, I wish I could remember the name. I'm going to have to link it in the description after this. I'm so sorry. But there is and they're really famous movies. There is a movie studio that exclusively creates documentary style films about various international conflicts and does full journalism exploring the development of the conflict, the reality of what it is like to survive and navigate that conflict, and also shows ways that anybody who is not actively involved or affected by the conflict can involve themselves. And they made films like Darfur Now. God, I'm going to look it up. I'm sorry for the clicking. I apologize. It's going to be so loud. But this is important. Where'd you go? So, do 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 do. Okay, so interesting. Okay, anyways, so films like Darfur Now, Sri Lanka's Killing Fields, um, and Eyes and Ears of God, Video Surveillance of Sudan, are all a series of documentary films. And all of those films had real world impact in what they did by bringing awareness to the issues that were being covered in those films. The financial profits made by those films went back into the actual on the ground activist communities that were working to address the conflict and actually help anybody affected by it. And it used really effectively social media campaigns. It used um, even traditional media campaigns as well to help explain and help raise awareness of the film, which in turn helped more people become involved. And I think things like that get forgotten when it comes to filmmaking, when it comes to art, when it comes to um, allowing the public to have informed consent in their participation. And I think that is perhaps my definition of activism in the form of art. It's when a piece of media, of creation, allows the public who is then taking in that piece of creation to effectively involve themselves or consent to be more involved in the. Can you hear that? Okay. In There are people speaking outside my window. Sorry. In the actual real world change. So it can either bring support to different aid programs, and people can choose to become more involved in a direct way through personal activism, and or they can get involved in the activism chain, because there are so many more levels to what you can do as an activist outside of the, I guess, the versions that you see on TV the most, which is either kind of resistance fighter style activists, or people breaking into like company vaults to steal information so they can show the world what's really going on, or protests where people get attacked by police and police dogs and thrown in jail and harmed. Um, there is a lot more to activism than those two specific versions. Those are technically the more extreme opportunities for activism. There's many different ways you can get involved that a lot of people don't realize, because the assumption is that to be an activist means that you need to have your body in the direct line of fire of the oppressor who is requiring there to be activism in the first place. And that's not always the case, uh, actually, at all. Because the big thing about activism, and this is what makes it so difficult to translate effectively into social media spaces, is the fact that activism is a really slow process. It takes centuries sometimes for things to actually happen, even if people are shouting from the rooftops from day one, all the way through 300 years later. It took centuries for women to get the right to vote. Who of women got the right to vote? It was only white women. So it took even longer for people of color, for Black women to get the right to vote. How long did it take for gay rights to even be considered as a decriminalized concept until 2010. And I think there were still laws in place until much later. How long have queer and gay people existed? Since the dawn of time. So, I think that, and that doesn't work with social media activism because you need to be able to feel as if you are accomplishing something quickly. You need to have a dopamine hit from the instant gratification that we have become used to within social media spaces. And I think it can be very depressing for many people who are becoming more aware of social injustices. In 2020, I think we saw a massive shift in what social media could do in regards to actually affecting real world response utilizing platforms like TikTok and Instagram and Twitter. You could actually encourage people to be involved and hold uh, various agitators accountable, both within the activist spaces and against any oppressors. So you would, because of social media, it became an international phenomenon. You saw a more global response to very clear injustice that was what our entire country was built on. But people were finally saying, no, we don't want this anymore. And we realize it because we've had to finally pause long enough to see how consistent of an issue this is. And there is no more business as usual because COVID placed very serious restrictions on the regular operations of life. So people had an opportunity to utilize social media in a way that they hadn't before. So you did actually see, in my view, the real opportunity and the real execution of activism and the integration of activist mindsets and policies into how people approached social media in general. Now, what's frustrating though is, of course, as time passes, that changes. And you start to see something else happening. And this is where it's not, I think it doesn't fall into entertainment and it doesn't fall into activism either. And that is where you see a lot of social pressure of cycling through major international conflicts. For example, um, when people when October 7th happened and a lot of the world became aware of what had been going on in Palestine since the 60s, a lot of people treated it as if it was new, but it started the conversation and it raised real world awareness on an international scale to the very real crimes and genocide that had been taking place for generations up to that point. And it led to real world response because of the intense utilization of social media to actually see what was happening in the most horrible ways. But it also led to the International Criminal Court finding the prime minister and the leading governmental figures of Israel at fault for creating a genocide. And um, warrants are out for their arrest. If they ever step into a country that is operates with the ICC, they are required to be held. That's why they only come to the United States and other countries that are familiar or comfortable for them, that will ally with them. But there was technically a very real world response. Has it managed to stop the issue? No, it hasn't. But has it stopped people trying to affect the issue? No, it's raised a lot more awareness because propaganda, and we have to bring propaganda back into this, was a huge component of how and why there wasn't conversation about this for so many decades. And anybody who spoke out against it was, like Vanessa Redgrave, seen as absolutely out of their mind. It was seen as the most anti Semitic thing you could do was to acknowledge that Palestine existed or was what was happening to Palestinians. And so there is, I think, sincere value in utilizing art and social methods of communication, especially as those methods of communication change with technology, to bring awareness to something. But eventually, that also stopped being as popular on social media. You stopped seeing as many infographics or petitions or opportunities for engagement that could connect you to on the ground activism networks. Instead, you started to see different conflicts. But at the same time, even with the focus in 2023 on what was happening in Palestine, there was an erasure of what was happening in Congo, in Sudan, what's still happening in Darfur, which is in Sudan. What is a consistent pattern of colonization and dehumanization. And so there becomes this cycle that happens, especially on social media, that replicates like the 24-hour news cycle of like the mid 2000s, I think, when especially Fox News was just like, I want anything. I want anything that will keep us on air and get us ratings. So whatever is the most emotionally volatile and intense, let's get that. Let's put it on air. And that's what social media has started to replicate. So even though it is fantastic that there is an opportunity to raise awareness about very serious real world issues and conflicts and connect people, especially if you do have a platform, to ways that you can get more involved, you get fatigued. And then you also start to see people stop doing the next step. In 2020, I think as a populace, as a culture, we shifted our mentality about social media and what you could do once you learned about something on social media and then actually change or do or affect in real life through actions you choose to take, either by donating or by operating in your community. Aqua says, Denzel Washington once said, media has become more about who says it first, not who says it correctly. Yes. And Brand is also identifying that Black Lives Matter was very effective in getting body cams on a lot of police officers. Exactly. Because at that era, it was kind of this ideal situation where the anger was strong enough that we were able to use social media as a mouthpiece and communication tool for collective action that resulted in collective response. So you really did see changes enacted. You saw policy changes enacted. You saw pressure being put on the governmental representatives by the communities they were representing, because sharing information on social media actually did have a huge effect. And at the same time, you saw a new normal be established where people started to focus on different, very real, very important issues, but a lot of a lot of people got burned out. They got tired. And so they stopped connecting to the next level of what actually maintains activist response. Instead, they settled on reposting an infographic or resharing a story or posting a like captions or a commentary and just kept moving on. So there wasn't ultimately much of anything that ended up happening after people got tired. Although, on the other hand, once again, when there was, and this is I think America specific, but when there was a action that was happening in person, we did see on social media, again, a return of using social media as an activist communication network, where, or yeah, with, especially with ICE, and you saw different cities, communities mobilizing in response, sharing data about what was going on in these various areas, and recording and keeping track and log of ICE arrests and deportations, and uh, also trying to keep a log of all of the atrocities that were being committed and people who were going missing that still haven't been found. There, there were a lot of things that people were actively using social media to do and then gather in real time to push back, to the degree that we saw the National Guard sent out to Minneapolis. We saw it sent to LA, to various areas of the country to quell protests and active response that people had learned how to do by this point. But how many of those posts do you see now about ICE in your communities? Has ICE gone away? No, they're still here. They're still going after people. It's just the connection between what you can do on social media, what you can maintain through an engagement minded communication strategy, isn't always something that translates to real world action and involvement. Well, what's positive about using social media is it can really start the conversation. So it's not entertainment, but it's also not exactly activism. It's not the full of what could be done in the full realm of what an activist network can do to respond to serious issues. But yes, let me see what I'm missing. Oh, interesting. Ellie is saying, I think Orange Man is probably a big reason for entertainment in activism and politics. He insulted his enemies with nicknames, posts memes, and tweets like no tomorrow. He is the origin for it. Yeah, I will say our what do I even call him? The Orange Mussolini is indeed very effective at utilizing social media as his way of combining entertainment and politics. But what's interesting is he's done that, and I know we've kind of had this conversation before, but he's done that since the 80s. He just used tabloids before. This time he's using social media, which certainly works, I think, a little bit easier and a little bit faster for him. But he also does get responded to in a way he couldn't with tabloids, because when he would post a tabloid, he'd send a tip in to a tabloid. It was mostly about advancing his social status. With things like what he's doing now, he is utilizing his power to create very real world dangers and encourage social acceptance of real world dangers on a mass scale. But he's a meme queen. gross. And Ellie says he was a former reality TV star, so that might be a factor. Exactly. Well, if anything, I feel like Trump was integral in the ultimate formation of the concept of reality TV. Not that he himself exclusively was, but he certainly enjoyed it and profited off of it and found ways to integrate himself into it and was pre-reality TV using the same concepts and tactics to popularize himself. So Brant says, but it's the way that he changes the conversation. And yes, we're back to the reflecting pool. Exactly, Brant. Oh, Trey says, the scene in Idiocracy where the president is firing off the machine gun in the White House. It's about 10 years, 5 to 10 years off. If he could hold one, I feel like he would have already done that by now. And Brandt says he doesn't answer the difficult questions. He reframes or ignores them and says what he wants. And that's very true because he reacts to everything, no matter how dire or serious or important it is, as if he's on a show, as if he's on Love Island and he's, what's her name? What's his name? What's, the racist Barbie? Ken, maybe? I don't know. But yeah, as if he's on a reality TV show and he's treating his, what is supposed to be the most formal version of communication as a governmental authority and a world power as a personality contest. And that is what got him elected. His ability to make racism and cruelty something not to be embarrassed of, and his ability to essentially cosplay as somebody who had grown up in a environment that is definitely much maligned in particular communities in the US. His ability to essentially present himself as if he knew the struggles and difficulties of very specific communities that tended towards white supremacy, white nationalism, Christian nationalism, and pander to some of their talking points, while also pander to anybody who has felt up to now as if they deserved more but weren't getting it and decided to scapegoat anybody of color or anybody queer as the reason behind it and not recognize how the capitalist system is at fault. But they don't want to have that conversation. Every time somebody tries, yeah, even Dean, it doesn't work well, does it? It's pretty frustrating. But that is the thing. So again, essentially, Trump's entire presidency, his social media presence, his utilization of Elon Musk as a, I don't even know what we could qualify Elon Musk as, but as a major distractor who's also very fortunately financially supportive of him, it's entertainment. None of that is actively, and if you're going to go on right-wing activism, none of that is activism for the communities that he's trying to garner votes from or money from or support from. But the realities TV component of it is entertaining enough for people who have no interest in discerning what he truly wants and are only looking at it as an opportunity to support their own prejudices and senses of invalidation and inferiority are comfortable with an entertainment-focused, political, propagandized environment. They don't want actual activism. They don't want to see what happens when you actually have community connection and an activist network that works together to make real change. They want the process of the end result. They want the end result. They want they do want free healthcare, and they do want universal basic income, and they do want um, what is ultimately socialism, because that's what they had under Reagan and other Republican uh, presidents, but they just don't want it to be extended to anybody but them. And they want to feel powerful. And so you have this interesting dichotomy where, on one hand, you can almost split preferences for certain kinds of political conversation into these two camps. Is it activist or is it entertainment? And a lot of people who are going to fall into significantly more deep right-wing spaces are going to prefer entertainment that is not actually activist, even if they say that it is. People always say, oh, he's going to drain the swamp, when he is the swamp. He's going to find all the child predators. He was best friends with them. Like, wait. Anyways, and then on the other hand, you have a more leftist, on the more leftist side of things, the center to the leftist side of things, you have different factions that do struggle to unite around a common ground. And you have a goal of actual activism, and then you have those who are unsure of where and how they actually want to, or if they want to be fully involved in activism or entertainment. And it's frustrating to see, for sure. Aqua, I do not doubt that you would. You fully would. And Brant says it's a shell game. They show the little things, the little people that think that they show people the little things to be angry about to distract them. And these people are also very comfortably distracted. Is every single person who is hardcore MAGA inherently incapable of analytical thought? No. They are absolutely capable. It's what they choose to utilize that capability on. And it is generally not the things that are going to challenge their desire for racism or their desire for superiority or approximation to superiority. So, and Brand actually brings up an important point. It's always a blurry line, though. You need some level of entertainment to engage people and move things. And that is true. There is that's kind of, I think, one of the points of why there is that middle thing where there was the entertainment on one side, activism on the other, and then earlier I was talking about the social exhaustion that people get from seeing intense horror on their social media feeds, and instead of connecting as they had for particular movements, specifically to protect communities against ICE and to respond and support Black Lives Matter, you do see this social exhaustion happening with international conflict, especially, and people getting too overwhelmed and checking out outside of doing certain basically kind of rote responses through social media instead of engaging on a more deeper level. So there has to be a way to maintain the movement, right? And in long-term activist spaces, there absolutely is. There is a way to fully engage in activism without getting that sense of exhaustion and horrific defeat, because it is a long game to change social expectation and systemic structure. But it's a worthwhile one, and so you have to keep working at it. But you also cannot do that if you feel like you're shouldering it all by yourself. That's where that algorithmic issue comes back into play, because the way the algorithm works is inherently it is built to be responsive to your most intense reactions. What will get you the most reactive? And it's going to be horror. It's going to be seeing evil. It's going to be seeing something that makes you feel sick. And that is why we get so burned out on social media. But there's another component to this conversation I think that's important, is that it's not just that if you are going to be involved in taking in media that has activist themes to it, that you are not being a good member of your community. If you're not actively, like, if you're seeing things um, on social media and you're seeing various types of art on social media that has activist leanings or has social commentary within it, what value does that have when there seems to be these extremes? Where does entertainment, exactly what Brent was talking about, fit on this scale? And I think that pre-social media, I do think people had a bit of a different relationship to media that enlightened to an issue, where you would have a lot of different art that could critique major social issues and could lead to serious changes. It didn't just have to be documentaries. I think the normalization of allowing for social critique through the method of art is, and always will be, and always has been, one of the oldest forms of human communication. We've done it ever since we started making art. Morals have always been embedded into our grand stories from when people passed stories down person to person by telling them versus sharing them in a recorded format or in an acted format through theater. There is always, always, always been a reason why we work those themes into narratives that might not just be about that one component. Because as a society, as a person, you need to be able to take it in. And it's exhausting if you don't. It's exhausting if you're only fixated on one component that is the cruelest. If instead you're allowed to experience all the senses of your emotion through a story, through a media, then you have the wherewithal to be able to take in the social commentary that might be worked into the story. You also have the ability to decide if you want to delve deeper, if it's a replication of something that's going on in the world you live in. So if it's a fantasy story and you're seeing a depiction of fantasy-like racism, you can probably recognize various representations of who that's supposed to be that are representative of real life examples in your own life or your own world. And you can maybe give yourself a chance to recognize how that's showing up in your life and the life of people around you, and it can enlighten you to change your behavior if you need to, or to look deeper into the subject in a way that actually, I think, is a little bit more likely to result in a healthy engagement. And that's what's missing. It's healthy engagement. There is a reason that we have structured stories told in all forms for so long to have social critique, social commentary, and real world experiences, even if they're in fantasy settings. Star Wars is a really good example of this, an exceptionally good example of this. Because even though I know there are people who are like, Star Wars isn't political, it is about the destruction of a democracy in the face of fascism and totalitarianism. What? So, and I think it was even George Lucas said that. It was like, how would a peaceful democracy allow a totalitarian um, autocrat to take control? And it's an exploration of what happens in that concept. And there you go. Like it is so very much possible to engage with something that is entertainment, but also allows you to engage in an activist focus. And so I think that there is a medium that needs to be found to ensure that people don't burn out. Yep, Aqua, this is how democracy dies, with thunderous applause. Ooh, Brant says he was going after George W. Bush in the prequels. Oh, yep. The prequels, even though they were not seen as high cinema or the best performances, great costumes though, they definitely had an important social critique that has led to them still being something relevant and I think emotionally engaging to this day. Are they good movies? No, I don't know. No. But they are still engaging because they are reflective of very real issues and social commentaries done in a way that's actually quite deft. So it allows people to engage emotionally and it allows people to question and reformat how they think without the normal prejudices that they might have if they were seeing a documentary about how um, the exact conversation happening about real world issues. Because it's exhausting and you feel overwhelmed and you feel powerless. But there is a way to engage with the difficulty of those emotions and the reality of the fear inspired by having to speak against a social ill that is embedded into a culture, especially if it's your own, that you can engage with a little bit more safely in media and art that allows you that space. And then the more that you engage with that, the more you can engage with more art that also has those questions. And it shifts how you see and react and recognize unhealthy patterns of behavior in your real life. So you can call those things out and you can feel more empowered in that process. So Brant says Star Wars is fun. It's not really ever been the greatest cinema. I know there are people who would disagree. I cannot have a particular opinion as I am not the most well-versed Star Wars person. Yeah, I've seen some things, and that was it. um, but yeah, um, Elliot says, if I was writing a totalitarian dystopian novel and the main villains for my novel were named Trump or Musk, my readers would claim that the names were too on the nose and no one would vote for them. I know. That's the difficulty. We couldn't make this up. If we wrote this out, people wouldn't believe us. But here we are. So, okay. So, let's bring this back. I started out talking about the because actually, Aqua's the one who brought it up, started out talking about the Obama Hope posters and the use of, in that case, propaganda, but still for a good cause. Um, yeah, yes, no, yeah, a better cause than the alternative. But yes, I started the conversation talking about like essentially propaganda and the use of art to establish emotional connection with a community in service of politics. And then we talked about how there are differences in art or in media that is focused on entertainment versus activism, and also looked at concepts that kind of fall in between and the burnout that happens when social media, which is now so integral to how we engage with media in general, other forms of media, everything from um, you know, TV shows to books to um, social debates that may have a heavy political leaning, if it's not clipped into a bite-sized 30-second video, it probably won't get seen. And so social media has become the kind of arbiter of what types of content, what types of narratives you do get exposed to based on algorithmic content. And that leaves something in the middle that's not exactly entertainment, but it's not exactly activism. And so we kind of explored all of those things. But I think there's one last thing, is celebrity. And we did talk about celebrity a little bit, but we primarily talked about influencers. But celebrity is also a factor that is actually not as effective as people assume it to be, which is fascinating. Ah, Aqua says, "So do I," said Gandalf, "and so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us." Ah, yeah. Yeah, that is painfully true. But okay, I think I'm going to leave the celebrity and activism conversation for another time because, again, we kind of explored virtue signaling and influencers and large platform holders. So I feel like we did kind of get to the main idea behind that. But I think the final thought that I have in this is essentially just that no matter what form media is only a component of activism. And without, even with art that helps you process difficult truths about society, and art that helps you maybe confront more painful realities, like various documentaries that are directly tied to activist networks, the media is only part of it. And without a involvement in a community that is actually engaged towards living in the goal of what the community has, it's gonna burn out. And no matter how many movies you watch or how many infographics you share, you're gonna get exhausted if that's the only way you interact. So, if you haven't yet, don't forget to um, look a little deeper and see what's going on near you and see what there types of things you can get involved in that makes sense. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a physical sense. There are ways to participate in activism that aren't purely on social media, but also don't have to be in person. There's lots of things you can do. And if you need any resources for that, I will link some in the description. But yeah, I'm glad we had this conversation. Oh, Brant says Democrats have more celebrities, but the smaller Republicans more often run for office. Sad. I'm like, sucks for you, bruh. That's embarrassing. Thinking of the recent, what was it, the 250th birthday celebration, or the one that's going to be happening on for Saturday, and the various attempts at celebrating that nobody has been at. They had to use stock photos to create the propagandized expectation that there was massive crowds. Yeah, no. That is one of, again, this is an example of social media doing something really effective in what it was supposed to do. Actually showing the reality of the situation and allowing others to partake in that reality as well. And that's what we should be using social media for. Actual community connection. And cute stuff. Cute bunnies. Also cute bunnies. We should use it for sharing cute bunnies. And kittens. But yes. Oh, yes. Trey says Star Wars is extremely political. Aqua! What? Oh my god. I'm so sorry. Happy birthday! I'm sorry. That was just like, I can't believe I missed your birthday. Happy birthday! Oh my gosh. I won't sing because that would be harm to your earbuds, but eardrums, eardrums. But I will say happy birthday. I am so happy that we get to celebrate you, even if it's a few days late. Well, I should have known by now. I should have known. I'm definitely making this a mark on my calendar so that I never forget again. Happy, 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 happy late birthday, Aqua. I hope you had a beautiful day, and I hope you had a calm and peaceful and relaxing and rejuvenating and just happy day. So happy, happy birthday. Yay! Well, no, Aqua, but I do remember last year you mentioning something, and I feel silly because I didn't write it down then. Actually, no, I think I did. I just don't have that calendar anymore. God, man. But yes. Okay. If anybody in the chat has not yet, let me know. If you are comfortable with me knowing when your generalized time of birthday celebrations might be during the year, please let me know so I can wish you birthday things in appropriate times. I don't want to be late. But okay. What Bobby Christine said. Yeah. Okay. All right. Oh. X-Men. Did you watch X-Men? We just watched the new one that just came out. You did, Aqua. That's so sweet. I love that. That's amazing. Congratulations. That's beautiful. Oh my gosh. We should probably have an X-Men stream at some point. I am a newbie. Very much so. I'm not pretending I'm an expert or that I know much of anything. But this new series is good. But anyways, okay. That's a different conversation. We can get into another time. I don't want to hold you all anymore because I know it's pretty late for most of you. So, thank you so much, everybody, for jumping into my live tonight. I am working on a new video that should be out next Friday, which, yay! And let's see what else. I will be seeing you again on Sunday for our watch party night. So if you haven't jumped into our Discord, jump into the Discord if you would like to watch movies together and discuss them. But yeah, all right. Yeah. Oh, it is very good. It is very, very good. I have caught up finally on the non, what do you call it? The animated versions of X-Men, at least. So I think I'm caught up there, but have definitely not even close, um, gotten into any of the comics, but there we go. Anyways, yeah, oh yeah, Bobby Christine, the Jubilee traps. They are definitely traps. They are very much engineered for engagement. They're engineered for rage bait, but I think that they can be helpful in very specific situations, but in general, they are something to be mindful of. And there may be other ways to find that sense of the recognition that those videos create for anybody who is feeling as if the world has lost its mind. There are definitely other ways to find that as well. My favorite X-Men, Gambit, Storm, those two. Also, Wolverine and Storm should have been together forever. Just saying. Just saying. I know it was only one timeline, but it would have been great. Anyways. Who's yours? Okay, wait, I'm getting I said I wouldn't get into the X-Men conversation, but here we are. Okay. Yes. I would like to know who your favorite X-Men is, Aqua, and anybody else in chat, and then I will be done for tonight. Because I can feel myself losing my voice. Yay! Okay. Oh, yeah, Nightcrawler. I love Nightcrawler. He's such a sweetie pie. He's such a sweetie pie. I feel like he's also, I don't know, he's fashionable. I feel like he would be a fashion influencer in another life, and I would follow him religiously. That makes sense. He is, yes. Yes. He's amazing. He is also a very high favorite. Man. Okay. Thank you everybody for jumping in for tonight's stream. I will be streaming next Wednesday, and then releasing a video on next Friday, and then doing a watch party this coming Sunday. So lots of things coming up. If you have any particular requests for topics for the next stream, let me know in chat, or actually, let me know in comments. In comments. And then I do also have a post on my community tab where you can always leave requests, regardless of what they are. If they are topic related, then please do, and I will look into it. Beast as a kid was a cutie pie. I feel like if anybody wore Nightcrawler's pointy shoulders, that would inherently mean they have fashion. So all you got to do is wear pointy shoulder jackets, and you're good to go. Okay, I'm done. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much for jumping in, and I'll see you all Sunday or Wednesday. Bye.